900 rectangular. And let's mount the balusters on the stringers. All right, say okay to that, and I think we're good here. Let's finish off the stair. Now, obviously, if you go up to the mid-story, go up to the mid-story level, so obviously we need some more railings here, right? Otherwise people could fall off this slab. So you're going to need to eventually put a railing in here, and one here, and one there, and one there, and one there, to close off the mid-level landing and make that safe. All right, but before we do that, let's cut a quick section facing the stairs so we can get a look at our stair head on. All right, so you can see what I mean. By drawing 3 arcs for the boundary, I get a flat section at the landing. If I'd made that 1 arc, then the landing would be curved and sloped, just like the other 2 boundaries would be. So that's why I had to make that in 3 arcs as opposed to just 1. Well, where I'd like to finish off today is by completing the curtain wall that encloses the bridge. But in order to draw the curtain wall that encloses the bridge, it would be helpful to draw the second pavilion first. The second pavilion is pretty similar to the first one. The only difference is that it's not at the O1 level, it's at the O4 level. So why don't we go to the O4 level, and we can at least draw some of the second pavilion here, and then we can add our curtain wall for the bridge. So you want to go back to your architectural wall tool, and we're going to use the same brick on CMU wall. Okay, everything else should probably be all set up already. So we know we're going up to the O5 level. We know our top offset's -300. We know we're using core face interior as our location line. So if you just do what you did before, use the pick line tool and offset these grid lines towards the outside to make the shape of our pavilion. So that'll be this one, then the angled one here. That's right, this one, and then this one. That'll make our 5 outside walls, you can then trim together. So now I know where my curtain wall ends. Right? So, I mean, I could continue to draw the rest of this pavilion while I'm here. So maybe I can draw the rest of this stuff pretty quickly. So maybe what you do now is change your detail back to coarse. Okay, why am I doing that? Well, it allows me to see this in 2 lines instead of, and seeing the outside face is much easier when it's only 2 lines. We need a slab in here, right? A foundation slab on grade, so why don't we add that in quickly? So you want to pick your foundation slab. All right. Choose your pick line tool. Pick the inside faces of those 5 walls and make a floor slab. All right, we have 8 columns here, similar to the others. So we're putting in 400 by 400 concrete structural columns. There's only 8 intersections now, of course, not 9. So use your at-grid feature and pick these 3 grids and those 3 grids, right? You don't want to pick the diagonal grid, because if you do, it'll rotate the columns 45 degrees. So you want to use the at-grid tool there, Kevin.
800 by 800?
No, 400 by 400. So same ones we used before. Okay, so pick your 6 grids, but pick the vertical and the horizontal one. Don't pick the diagonal one, because that'll rotate the columns. And go ahead and place those. So to adjust these columns, we're going to have to select them. Now, selecting one and extending the selection is not going to work in this case, because it'll end up selecting the columns in the other pavilion as well. So you'll need to select them with a window. So if you can select those 8 columns with a window and filter out anything that's not a column. You don't want to pick these 2 columns, right? So we're not adjusting those. You want to just pick the concrete ones. So you might have to use more than one window. So you should have 8 structural columns. So for the base of those is going to be the O3 level. And the top of those is going to be the O5 level with a top offset again of negative 250. All right, now if you go back to the parking level for a sec, and notice now here in the main building how our columns and our walls are overlapping. If you want the columns to look as if they're cut out of the wall, you can use the join geometry tool. So if you go to the Modify tab here and choose Join Geometry, remember how Join Geometry works. Pick the column first and then the wall, and the column will cut itself out of the wall as long as they're different materials. If they're the same materials, then they join together and look like one object. And yes, when you do the corners, you have to do it twice because it cuts 2 walls, not just one. So you can use that to cut the columns out of the walls where they overlap. If those were architectural columns, not structural columns, then if you put them in a wall, they become the material of the core of the wall. So if those were architectural columns instead of structural ones, they would appear as concrete block. In other words, they would appear as a thickening of the exterior wall, or in other words, a pilaster. And of course, if you do that at the O1 level, then the same thing, you won't need to do it at any other levels, because that does it for the entire wall. All right, and you may need to do that for the other pavilion as well. Of course, you'll have to go up to the 4 level, O4 level, and do the same thing here. You might want to increase the detail there just when you do the corner to make sure you've got everything selected there. All right, that looks good. Let's go to the roof level. As soon as we get that done, go to the roof level, and we'll put our structural slab on the second building. We've done this one already, so go to the other view. There you go. All right, so again, a structural floor slab. And I would use pick line and pick the outside edges. Go ahead and form that, and in 3D we'll add the same slab edge that we added to the other building. You want to go to your floor tools and choose floor slab edge. Okay, and it's already set up, so there you go. Quick and easy. All right, so the last thing I'd like to finish today is the curtain wall that encloses the bridge. So it's best sometimes not to try and do one thing till it's entirely complete. you know, by doing a little bit of everything here, it gives us the chance to inspect the relationship between everything, right? So now we'll go to the 04 floor level plan and center the bridge there. So I've given you some specs on how I'd like you to program the curtain wall for spacings of grids and mullions. So what I've asked you to do here is go to your architectural wall tool, and on the list there, we're going to scroll down and choose the curtain wall style called storefront. Then we'll go to edit type to change its spacing slightly. Now, you could duplicate this and give it another name if you wish, but we only have one style of curtain wall here, so I didn't bother. So for our vertical grid maximum spacing, I'd like to go with 2,000. For the horizontal grid, I'd like to change the layout method from fixed distance to minimum spacing, and set the minimum spacing to 1,000. Now, when you have a curtain wall which is pre-programmed like this, everything that comes in will come in as pins. So that's what allows it to adapt if you make the curtain wall taller or make it longer or shorter. Because everything is pinned, when you stretch it or change its height, it automatically resizes things according to its programming. Another thing you might want to notice about this curtain wall called storefront is that automatically embed is clicked on. That simply means that if you put this curtain wall on top of another wall, a basic wall, it'll automatically cut itself out of the wall that it overlaps. Right? And that's one of the things that distinguishes storefront from the other styles, but that this is checked on. All right, let's say okay to that. Now, for the bottom of my curtain wall, I want this to go down below the beams and purlins. So for the base constraint, I want to use a base offset of -1100. So that'll take it down below the bridge floor. For the top offset, I want to go to the underside of the roof slab, so that'll be -250. Let's change from medium to coarse level of detail. And the only reason I'm doing that is it shows these walls now as you know, double lines instead of many lines. And now let's draw our curtain wall from the intersection of the reference plane and the outside face of this wall. So if you want to pick that intersection there, and go across to the intersection of the other building, so all the way to the face of the building over here. All right, so that draws a piece of curtain wall. Now, when you draw a curtain wall like this, you don't have a choice of location line, all right? Curtain wall is defined down its midpoint only. So there's no way to move it left or right using a different location line. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to take this curtain wall now and push it towards the large columns. Now, I didn't give you a dimension for this, so what would you normally want to do? You'd want to measure it, right, so you can find out how far you can move it, and you'd probably want to leave a little bit of a gap between the two, say an inch or so, right, so that they're not touching. So if you want to know how far something is in Revit, there's a tool to measure. It's called the measure tool. It looks like a ruler. It's essentially the same as the dimension tool, except it doesn't leave a dimension behind. So it's pretty much the same thing. So let's try that. Let's go to the measure tool. What I'd like you to do is measure from the face of the curtain wall to the nearest point on the column. So why don't you select it at the grid, right? And that'll take you to the center line of the column. But I'd like to measure, so if you can find the face of the curtain wall here along this grid line. Kevin, I don't think you're following me here, so. What we're trying to find out is what's the distance from the face of the curtain wall here to the face of the column there. And I think if you measure it, you'll find it's 1395. So if we want to leave an inch to spare, we can move it 1370. So let's take this curtain wall, move it in this direction by 1370, and that'll just clear the inside of the column. So select the entire curtain wall and move it. Yeah, it's the entire curtain wall you want to select, not the individual pieces. So yeah, you're best off to pull out a little bit. I wouldn't even do it that way. I would pick it with the mouse. And remember, you can use the tab key to cycle through things, right? So when it finds the entire curtain wall as a single object, when it tells you it's found the entire curtain wall,
You should be able to pick it.
yeah, when you see the ends highlighted like this, when you see the ends, there's a little 45, or there's a little 90-degree angle there at the ends, then you know you pretty much found it. So if you can find the curtain wall, pick your move tool, move it at a 45-degree angle by a distance of 1370. And while it's still selected, you can now make another one by mirroring it using the reference plane as your line of reflection. All right, so by drawing the two pavilions, that now tells us how long our curtain walls need to be, and this now informs how wide our floor can be, because remember, the floor has to be on the inside of the curtain wall goes down past it. All right, now I think the next thing to do would be to go to the section number 1 to view the curtain wall on the bridge. And let's shade that in so we can see the color of the panels. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to select the 16 panels across the top. So there's 8 here, right? But there's 2 curtain walls. So if you make a selection, pull out a little bit, you need to see the whole bridge. So if you can make a selection, say from here to here, and filter out whatever's not a curtain panel, you should end up with 16 curtain panels. Now we can unpin them. So unpin, there's, I guess you've selected it already, there you go. And now change it from glazed to solid. Now that's going to be difficult for you to do because of your screen resolution. Oh, there it is, okay. So I think you had it there. So if you can change it from glazed to solid, okay, and we want the same thing for the bottom row of panels too. Because remember, we have purlins now that are actually penetrating through that curtain wall. They can't go through glass, but they can go through solid panels. All right, let's take a look at what we have in 3D. Let's make the topography visible again. Okay, and let's save what we've done. And this is where we'll pick it up next class. All right, so for those people working along, if you can see if you can get to this level, that would be great. Save